The house smelled like coffee she hadn't made. Serena Ashworth stood in the kitchen doorway at 6:47 in the morning, still wearing yesterday's cardigan, and stared at the half-empty pot sitting warm on the burner. The light above the stove was on. The chairs were pushed in. Everything looked exactly the way it always looked. Except she hadn't come downstairs yet, and her husband's car was gone from the driveway. She told herself it was nothing. She was good at that. Serena had spent 11 years getting good at it. She poured herself a cup, sat at the island, and watched the snow fall over the backyard. It was March in Ottawa, and the kind of cold that didn't announce itself. It just settled in and stayed. The baby monitor on the counter crackled softly. Upstairs, their daughter Lila was still sleeping, 4 months old and blissfully unaware that her mother hadn't slept more than 3 consecutive hours since October. Serena's phone buzzed. A text from her husband, Kevin Ashworth. Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight either. She read it twice, set the phone face down on the granite counter, picked up her coffee with both hands and held it until the heat started to hurt. Don't wait up. On a Tuesday. In March. She thought about the cologne she'd smelled on his jacket last Thursday. Not his usual one, something sharper, lighter. The kind of thing that clings to fabric when you've been pressed against someone else for long enough. She didn't say anything. She never said anything. Instead, she went upstairs, lifted Leela from the crib with practiced quiet, and sat in the rocking chair by the window while her daughter nursed. Outside, a snowplow moved slowly down their street in the gray early light, and Serena watched it go and tried to remember the last time Kevin had looked at her the way he used to. Not with desire, not even with warmth. Just attention, the basic human courtesy of being seen. She couldn't remember. Serena Ashworth had married Kevin at 31. She was a family law paralegal with a reputation for being meticulous and composed, the kind of woman other people described as having it together. Kevin was a project manager for a commercial real estate firm. Good-looking in a forgettable way, reliable in the early years, funny at dinner parties. Her mother had approved. His parents had approved. The wedding was in September, at a vineyard outside Gatineau, and everyone cried at the right moments. For a few years, it was genuinely good. They bought a house in Westboro. They argued about normal things. Whose turn to call the plumber, whether to spend Christmas with his family or hers. He remembered her birthday without being reminded. Small gestures. Enough to feel like a life. Then the promotions started. His travel increased. Hers stayed the same. When she found out she was pregnant, he hugged her and said all the right things. But she noticed, the way you notice something you've already known for a while, that the hug lasted exactly as long as it needed to, and not a second longer. She told herself it was stress. She was good at that too. She took her maternity leave. He went back to work within a week of Lila's birth, citing a project deadline. Her stitches were still healing. She was bleeding and exhausted and terrified of this small creature who needed her every 2 hours, and Kevin sent texts asking how things were going with the same casual tone he used to ask about groceries. He came home after 7 most nights. Sometimes after 9. He held Lila when Serena put her directly into his arms, and the moment the baby fussed, he handed her back with an apologetic smile. "I'm just not a natural at this yet," that's what he said. As if fatherhood was a skill that developed on its own, without practice, without presence. Serena nodded and took the baby back. She got good at that too. She first noticed Diane Pelletier in November. Not her name. She didn't know the name then. She noticed a contact in Kevin's phone saved as D. Work, which wouldn't have meant anything except that he angled the screen away when the name appeared. A small movement, instinctive. The kind men make when they've gotten comfortable, but not quite comfortable enough. Serena didn't ask. She filed it away the way she filed everything, quietly, precisely, in a folder she didn't open yet. Over the following weeks, she started paying a different kind of attention. Not the anxious, frantic attention of a woman who didn't want to know, but the careful, methodical attention of someone who had spent a decade reviewing documents for inconsistencies. She noticed the pattern of his late evenings. She noticed the mileage on his car didn't match the office commute. She noticed that he started buying new underwear, not from the brand he'd always used, but from somewhere else, in colors she'd never seen him wear before. In December, she found a receipt in his coat pocket. A restaurant in Hintonburg, Canteen, the new French place on Wellington. For 2 people, on a Wednesday evening when he'd told her he was at a project debrief downtown. She put the receipt back exactly where she'd found it. That night, after Lila fell asleep, Serena sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and wrote down everything she remembered. Dates, inconsistencies, the cologne, the screen angle, the mileage, the receipt. She wrote it all down in her paralegal's handwriting, clear, dated, specific, and then she folded the paper and tucked it inside her copy of The Handmaid's Tale on the 3rd shelf of the bookcase, where Kevin had never once reached. She didn't cry. She was past that somehow. She had the strange, calm feeling of a woman who had already known something for months and was only now allowing herself to admit it. She made a decision that night. Not to confront him, not yet. To prepare. Her colleague at the law firm was a woman named Bridget Osey, a junior associate 15 years, her senior in temperament, if not in age, who had handled her own divorce at 37 with the efficiency of someone decommissioning a building. Bridget had a gift for making difficult things feel administrative, which Serena found deeply comforting. She called Bridget on a Friday afternoon in January, when Leela was napping and the house was quiet. "I think I need some information," Serena said. "Hypothetically." "Hypothetically," Bridget repeated. If a woman needed to document a husband's infidelity for the purposes of a separation proceeding, how would she do it properly? What would hold up? Another pause, then quietly, "You should have called me 2 months ago." "I know. Come in Monday. We'll talk." Not hypothetically. What followed was not dramatic. It was paperwork and patience and discipline. Bridget connected her with a family lawyer named Adele Fortin, who had handled over 300 separation cases in the Ottawa region, and who looked at Serena's handwritten notes with the expression of someone pleasantly surprised. "You've already done half the work," Adele said. "You have documentation instincts." "I'm a paralegal." "Right." She set down the notepad. "We're going to need more, but this is a start." Over the next 6 weeks, Serena built her case the way she built every case, carefully, without emotion, without letting her hands shake when they wanted to. She gathered bank statements she was legally entitled to access. She noted the dates of his absences against his claimed schedule. She had a friend, a woman named Priya, who'd met Diane Pelletier at a work function she'd attended as Kevin's +1 before Serena was pregnant, confirm the connection. Diane Pelletier was a marketing director at a firm that worked with Kevin's company. She was 34, recently separated from someone else, and, according to Priya, very attentive to Kevin at that function, in a way that Priya had noted but not mentioned at the time, because she hadn't wanted to be the person who says something and turns out to be wrong. "I'm sorry," Priya said. "I should have told you." "You didn't know for certain," Serena said. "I barely knew for certain." She wasn't angry at Priya. She didn't have room for that kind of anger anymore. She was saving it. In early February, Kevin told her he was going to Toronto for a long weekend for a conference. He was not in Toronto. She didn't follow him. She didn't need to. She had, with Adele's guidance, retained a licensed private investigator, a quiet man named Harold, who drove a gray Subaru and charged by the hour and said very little. Harold provided photographs, time-stamped and location verified, of Kevin and Diane Pelletier at a hotel in Montreal. 2 nights. Room registered under Kevin's corporate card. Serena received the file on a Thursday morning via encrypted email, while Lila sat in her bouncer on the kitchen floor and batted at a plastic ring with great concentration. She looked at the photographs for approximately 45 seconds. Then she closed the email. Then she picked up her daughter and held her against her chest and pressed her face into the soft, warm weight of her and stood there in her kitchen for a long time without moving. She didn't cry then either. But she felt something break open. Not dramatically, not with sound, but the way ice breaks in April. Quietly, at the seams, in the places that had been holding longest. That evening, she called Adele. "I have everything I need," she said. "Good," Adele said. "Then we're ready." She had 3 weeks. She used them well. Adele guided her through each step. First, the financial accounts. Serena was co-owner of both their joint accounts and the joint savings, and she moved her share to a personal account Adele had advised her to open months ago at a different institution. Not hiding assets. Entitled assets. Her name was on everything. She was simply reorganizing. Then, Bridget, who had quietly become something between a colleague and a co-conspirator, helped her identify a subletter for the house, not to sell. Just to establish that Serena had a right to it, that she intended to occupy it, and that Kevin couldn't simply decide she was leaving if she wasn't. She told her sister, Gwen, who lived in Kingston and who drove to Ottawa on a Saturday when Kevin was out, and sat at the kitchen table with 2 coffees and said nothing for a long moment after Serena finished. "What do you need?" Gwen asked. "I need someone to know. Serena, I need somewhere Lila and I can go for a few nights if we need to." "You have it," Gwen said. "Both of those things." She packed a bag in stages, spreading it over 2 weeks so nothing looked sudden. A few of Lila's things first, then her own. The photographs she cared about. Not the wedding ones, but the ones from before. Her mother's ring, her laptop. The notepad in The Handmaid's Tale, which she felt was appropriate to take with her. She booked a week's leave from the firm. Bridget covered for her without asking questions. And then, on a Tuesday morning in the second week of March, while Kevin was at the office, Serena Ashworth put her daughter in the car seat, loaded the car with what she needed, and left the house in Westboro without looking back. She drove to Gwen's. She called Adele from the driveway. "We're done," she said. "The application's filed," Adele told her. "He'll be served this afternoon." Kevin called at 6:47 that evening, which Serena found symmetrical without planning it. She let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. She sat at Gwen's kitchen table and fed Lila, and watched her sister make pasta and let the phone vibrate against the table with each call, like a metronome counting down something she was no longer afraid of. The voicemail, when she finally listened, was what she'd expected. Disbelief. Anger just beneath the surface of words that were working very hard to sound reasonable. "Serena, I don't know what you've been told, or what you think you know, but we need to talk about this like adults. Call me back." She did not call back, he texted. She read the text because Adele had asked her to document any communication. "Where are you? Where is Lila? This is not okay. You can't just leave. I want to see my daughter." She forwarded each one to Adele. Then, a message from an unknown number, short and stranger than the others. "I think we should talk. This isn't what I wanted." Serena stared at it. Diane Pelletier had found her number. She wasn't sure how. She typed back after a long moment. "I have nothing to say to you. Please don't contact me again." Then she blocked the number. She told Adele about that too. The mediation was scheduled for mid-April. Kevin arrived with a lawyer, a man named Stewart from a downtown firm who specialized in family disputes and wore his suits with the particular confidence of someone who'd never lost a case he expected to win. Kevin looked tired, and underneath the tiredness, something else. Not guilt, exactly. Something adjacent to it. The look of a man who had been caught not at something wrong, but at something he'd genuinely convinced himself was fine. He wanted shared custody. He'd barely held Lila for more than 20 minutes without handing her back, and now he wanted shared custody. Adele had predicted this and had prepared accordingly. His access to the child during the first 4 months of her life, Adele said to Stewart, across the mediation table with the pleasantly even tone of someone laying down cards they know are better, was limited and documented as such. "We have records of his overnight absences, the hospital discharge documentation, and communications indicating his working hours during the postpartum period." Stewart started to respond. Adele continued. "We also have corroborating evidence of an ongoing extramarital relationship that predated the child's birth, conducted during periods Mr. Ashworth claimed to be available to his family." A silence settled over the table. Kevin looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked at the table. Serena looked at the window and thought about the snowplow on her street in March, moving slow and steady through the gray light, clearing what needed to be cleared. The mediation took 4 hours. Kevin's initial position eroded steadily, the way a riverbank erodes, not all at once, but inevitably, one small piece at a time. By the end, he agreed to supervised visits, bi-weekly, pending a formal assessment. He agreed to the house remaining in Serena's name through the separation period. He agreed to spousal and child support as calculated under federal guidelines. He did not get what he came for. He got what was fair, which turned out to be considerably less. She heard through Priya that Diane Pelletier had ended things with Kevin in March. Around the time of the Montreal photographs, apparently or shortly after, The timing was unclear, but what was clear was that she hadn't wanted what the situation had become. She'd been told certain things about the state of Kevin's marriage that turned out not to be accurate. She had her own life to reconsider. Serena didn't feel triumph at this. She felt something quieter, a kind of grim symmetry. Kevin had lost the marriage he'd taken for granted, and the relationship he'd believed was his exit strategy, in approximately the same month. She hoped the lesson was instructive. She wasn't certain it was. By the time the first crocus came up in the front bed at Gwen's house, Lila could almost roll over. She practiced it on the living room floor with tremendous focus, rocking herself to the edge of the motion and back, making small sounds of effort. Serena sat beside her on the rug and watched her daughter work at it, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Room. Just room. Inside herself. Space that had been occupied by dread and vigilance, and the constant low-frequency hum of a life that wasn't working, and now wasn't anymore. Gwen came in from the kitchen and sat on the couch. "You okay?" "I think so," Serena said. And then, "Yeah, I think actually yes." Lila rocked herself forward and finally tipped all the way over onto her stomach and looked up from the floor with an expression of pure astonishment at what she'd managed to do. Serena laughed. The real kind. The kind that surprised her. She thought, "That's it. That's what it looks like. You work at the thing long enough, you get past the point where you thought you were stuck. And then you're somewhere new, looking up from a new position, wondering why you thought you couldn't do it." She picked her daughter up and held her tight, and thought about all the work that was still ahead. The legal proceedings, the custody assessments, the long, careful business of building a life that was hers. And felt, for the first time in 11 years, like she was moving in the right direction. Not perfectly, not easily, but forward. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough.